Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening. So, hey y'all. It is like I said, it's bedtime stories for grown folk, right? For adults. I'm about to do something that I love to do, and that is I love to read, right? But I don't really have time to read, right? Or I don't often have time to read. I got time today. So I love to read. Not only do I love to read, I love to be read too, right? Um, and I love reading too, but I like reading. Let me get my water. My voice is a little scratchy. I also like reading, you know, in vernaculars and stuff like that, and accents and that kind of stuff. I think it's a little bit of the thespian in me, right? But today, tonight, I was reading. I've been reading for about an hour and a half because I got time today. And then I just thought, well, you know what? I'm gonna do something I always want to do, and that is to do some reading online, right? So I decided tonight would be a great night to share a bedtime story. Um, a grown folk bedtime story because this is not necessarily a kid bedtime story. It won't hurt them, but it's just not necessarily for them. So the name of this, okay, so let me tell you this. Zora Neale Hurston is one of my favorite authors, if she's not my absolute favorite authors. If you don't know anything about her, she's all about she was a collector of stories, right? Really porch tales. And her latest that was just released, I think last year or maybe the year before, was Zora Neale Hurston hitting a straight lick with a crooked stick. I've been reading these short stories and they are absolutely fabulous. So I'm gonna read one tonight, and and I hope you enjoy it. This one is called. I'm gonna have to take off my glasses because my eyes are a little older, so I read better without my glasses. All right, so this one is called Black Death. Funny though, but just pay attention. We Negroes in Eatonville know a number of things that the hustling, bustling white man never dreams of. He's a materialist with little care for overtones. So, for instance, if a white person were halted on the streets of Orlando and told that old man Morgan, the excessively black Negro hoodoo man, can kill any person indicated and paid for without ever leaving his house or even seeing his victim, he'd laugh in your face and walk away wondering how long the Negro would wallow in ignorance and superstition. But no black person in a radius of 20 miles will smile. Not much, because they know. His achievements are far too numerous to mention singularly. Besides, many of his cures or conjures are kept secret. But everybody knows that he put the loveless curse on Della Lewis. She's been married 7 times, but none of her husbands have ever remained with her longer than 28 days, that same time that Morgan had prescribed as the limit. Hiram Lester's left track was bought to him with $5, and when the new moon came again, Lester was stricken with paralysis while working his own orange grove. There was the bloody flux that he put on Lucy Potter. He caused Emma Taylor's teeth to drop out. He put the shed skin of a black snake in Horace Brown's shoes and made him as the wandering Jew. He put a sprig of Lena Merchant's hair in a bottle, corked it, and threw it into a running stream with the neck pointing upstream, and she went crazy. He buried Lily Wilcox's fingernails with lizard's feet and dried up her own blood. All of these things and more can easily be proved by the testimony of the villagers because they ought to know. He lives alone in a 2-room hut down by Lake Blue Sink. The bottomless is what they call it. His eyes are reddish, and the large gold hoop earrings jangling on either side of his shrunken black face make the children shrink in terror whenever they meet him on the corner or in the street or in them woods where he goes to dig roots for his medicines. But the doctor cannot spend his time merely making folks ill. He has sold himself to the devil over the powerful black cat's bones that alone will float upstream, and many do what he wills. Life and death are in his hands, and he sometimes kills. He sent old Lady Crooms to her death in the lake. She was a rival hoodoo doctor and laid claims to equal power. She came to her death one night, and that very morning, Morgan had told several people that he was tired of her pretenses. He would put an end to it and prove his powers. That very afternoon, near sundown, she went down to the lake to fish, telling her daughter, however, that she did not wish to go. But something seemed to be forcing her, she said. And after dusk, someone heard her scream and rush to the lake. She had fallen in and drowned. The white coroner from Orlando said she met her death by falling into the water during an epileptic fit. But the villagers knew. White folks are very stupid about some things. They can think mightily, but they cannot feel. But the undoing of Bo Diddley was his masterpiece. He had come to Eatonville from up north somewhere. He was a waiter at the Park House Hotel over in Maitland, where Docia Boger was a chambermaid. She had a very pretty brown body and face, sang also into the at the as alto in the Methodist choir, and played the blues on her guitar. And soon Bo Diddley was with her every moment he could spare from his work. He was stuck on her all right for a long time. They would linger in the shrubbery about Park Lake or go for long walks in the woods on Sunday afternoon to pick violets. They are abundant in Florida woods in the wintertime, you know. The park house always closed in April, and Bo was planning to go north with the white tourists. It was then Docia's mother discovered that Bo should have married her daughter weeks earlier. Mr. Diddley, said Miss Boger, I'm a widow woman, and Docia's all I got, and I know you's going to do what you ought to. She hesitated a moment, and then she studied his face. "That no trouble," she said. I don't want to make no talk round town, you see. In a split second, the vivacious, smiling Bo had vanished. A very hard, vitriolic stranger occupied his chair. Look a here, Miss Boger. I'm a man that's traveled a lot, been most everywhere. Don't try to come that stuff over here. What I got to marry Docia for? Cause the surprise of his anger threw the old woman into a panic. You's the cause of her condition, ain't you? Docia, embarrassed and mortified, began to cry. Oh, I see the little plot now. He glanced maliciously toward the girl and back again to her mother. But I'm none of your down south country sucker. Go try that on some other clodhopper. Don't try that on me. I got money to fight. Bo Diddley sobbed. I'm sorry, Docia sobbed. You ain't calling me a lie, is you? And in her misery, she started toward the man who, though for 4 months, was constant association and assurance that she had learned to love and trust. Yeah, you're lying. You're sneaking little. Oh, you not even good sawdust, he said. Marry you? Me marry you? Why, I could pick up a better woman out of the gutter than you. I'm a married man anyway. So you might as well forget your little scheme, you and your mama. Docia fell back stunned. But Bo, You said you wasn't. Dosha wailed. Oh, Bo replied, with a gesture of dismissal of the whole affair. What difference does it make? A man will say anything, and sometimes. There are certain kinds of women that men always lie to. In her mind's eye, Dosha saw things for the first time without her tinted glasses, and real terror seized her. She fell upon her knees and clenched the nattily clad clothes of her seducer. Oh, Bo, she cried, struggling to hold him, as he, fearing for the creases in his trousers, struggled to free himself. You said, you said, you promised. Oh, well, you ought not have to believe me. You ought to have known I didn't mean it. Anyway, I ain't gonna marry you. So what you gonna do? Do whatever you feel big enough to try. My shoulders are broad. He left the house, hating the two women bitterly, as only he could, and he injured them. At the hotel, omitting mention of his shows of affection, his pleas, his solemn promises to Dosha, he told the other waiters how that piece of earth's refuse had tried to entangle him, to force him into marriage, he said. He enlarged upon his theme and told them all in strict confidence how she had been pursuing him all winter, how she had waited in ambush time and had dragged him down by the lake, and well, he was only human. It couldn't have happened with the right kind of girl, and he thought too much of himself to marry any other than the country's best. So the next day, all of Eatonville knew, and the scourge of tongues was added to Dosha's woes. Mrs. Boger and her daughter kept strictly indoors, suffering, weeping, and growing very bitter. Mama, if he just hadn't tried to make me out to be a bad girl, I could look over the rest of it in time. Mama, but he tried to make out that I. Dosha broke in weeping again. Drip, drip, drip with her daughter's tears on the old woman's heart, each drop calcifying a little the fibers till at the end of 4 days the petrifying process was complete. Where once had been warm, pulsing flesh was now a cold, heavy stone that pulled down, pressing out normal life and bowing the head of her. The woman died, and in that heavy, cold stone, a tinge, a female tiger was actually born. She was ready to answer the questions Bo had flung so scornfully at her old head. Well, what are you going to do? Dosha slept, huddled on the bed. A hot salt tear rose to Mrs. Boger's eyes and rolled heavily down the quivering nose. Must Dosha awake always to that awful desolation, she thought? Robbed of everything, even her faith. She knew then that the world's greatest crime is not murder. Its most terrible punishment is meted to her of too much faith and too great love. So she turned down the light and she stepped into the street. It was near midnight and the village slept, but she knew of one house where there would be a light. There would be a pair of eyes still awake. As she approached Blue Sink, she all but turned back. It was a dark night, but the lake shimmered and glowed like phosphorus near the shore. It seemed that figures moved about on the quiet surface. She remembered that folks said at Blue Sink, they called it the bottomless. It was Morgan's graveyard, and all of Africa woke up in her blood. A cold, prickly feeling stole over her and stood on her hair on end. Her feet grew heavy and her tongue dry and stiff. In the swamp at the head of the lake, she saw a jack-o'-lantern darting here and there, and 300 years of America passed like the mist of morning. Africa reached out its dark hand and claimed its own. Drums, tom, 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 beat in her ears. Strange, Strange demons seized her. Witch doctors danced before her, laid hands upon her, alternatively freezing and burning her flesh at the same time until she found herself within the house of Mr. Morgan. She was not permitted to tell her story. She opened her mouth, but the old man chewed a camphor leaf or two. He spat into a small pail of sand and asked, "How do you want to kill him? By water, by sharp edge, or by bullet?" The old woman almost fell off the chair in amazement that he knew her mind. He merely chuckled a bit and handed her a drinking gourd. "Dip up a teeny bit of water and pour it on the floor. By that time, you'll know." She dipped up the water out of a wooden pail and poured it upon the rough floor. "I want to shoot him. But how can I do that without look here?" Morgan directed and pointed to a huge mirror, scarred and dusty. He dusted his face carefully. "Look in the glass. Without turning your head. Don't turn your head. When it comes, you shoot to kill it. Take good aim." Both faced about and gazed hard into the mirror that reached from floor to ceiling. Morgan turned once to spit into the pail of sand. The mirror grew misty, darker, near the center. And then Mrs. Boger saw Bo walk up to the center of the mirror and stand looking at her, glaring and sneering. She all but fainted in superstitious terror. Morgan thrust the gun into her hand. She saw the expression on Bo Diddley's face change from scorn to fear, and she laughed. "Take good aim," Mr. Morgan cautioned. "You can't shoot but once." She leveled the gun at the heart of the apparition in the glass and fired. It collapsed. The mirror grew misty again, and then it cleared. In horror, she flung her money at the old man, who seized it greedily and fled into the darkness, dreading nothing, thinking only of putting distance between her and the house of Morgan. The next day, Eatonville was treated to another thrill. It seemed that Bo Diddley, the darling of the ladies, was in the hotel yard making love to another chambermaid. In order that she might fully appreciate what a great victory was hers, he was reciting the conquest of Dosha, how Dosha had loved him, how she pursued him, knelt down in front of him and kissed his feet, begging him to marry her, when suddenly he stood up very straight, clasped his hand over his heart, grew rigid, and fell dead. The coroner's verdict was death from natural causes, heart failure. But they were mystified by what looked like a powder burn directly over his heart. But the Negroes knew instantly when they saw that mark. But everyone agreed that he got justice. Mrs. Boger and Dosha moved to Jacksonville, where she was married well. And the white folks never knew and would have laughed had anyone told them. So why mention it? All right, I read that one tonight for the first time. That one is called, in case you want to get this book, that one is called Black Death. And that is a short story in this book, Zora Neale Hurston hitting a straight lick with a crooked stick. Get you a copy today. All right, that's bedtime. Y'all go to bed. That's what I'm about to do.